Now that you've learned how to work with shared preferences and also how to create menus and use alert dialogues, we're going to put this all together and build a note-taking app. And here's how it works. So when we started off, we've got an example note there that we can then tap on and edit using a full screen edit text. I'll leave it to you to figure out how to do that. And then, of course, we can change this note to anything we like. And then we can go back and see the changes there. We can also add new notes using the menu. So add a note, we'll add a blank note. And then we can go back and we can see both of those notes. And indeed, we can long press to get an alert as well. And then if we tap yes, that's saved. All this, of course, as well is covered by permanent storage using shared preferences. So you can shut down the app and you'll see exactly the same set of notes when you open it up again. So that's the challenge. Best of luck. Pause the video and off you go. Okay, hope that went well as ever. I'm going to start with a new project and we'll just call this Notes. Next, and we'll have the Marshmallow SDK and an empty activity. And our first activity then is going to be our list view where we'll put our notes as the user saves them. So let's start by adding that in. We'll do that in our activity main layout. And then I'll get rid of the text view and drag in our list view. Here we go. And I'll give it an ID of list view. All right, that's all we need for now. So back over to main activity, and then in the onCreate method, I'll just run it in the background there. Get things all set up. We'll create a list view variable to link to our list view. We'll call it list view. And we're going to cast this to a list view, and we'll get it from find view by ID using resources.ids.listView. Now we're going to need, as usual, an array list to link to our list view. I'm going to need to access it from all parts of the app, so I'm going to define it up here. It's going to be an array list of strings, and I'll call it notes. And this is going to be a new array list. Okay, and for now, we'll just add two notes. An initial note, so I'll call it example note. Then we'll set up our array adapter. Call it array adapter. And this is going to be a new array adapter using the main activity or this as the context, and then android.r.layout.simpleList item 1 as the format, and then notes as the list array. And then we'll take our list view and we'll set an adapter to it, and that adapter will be array adapter. Okay, let's just add those in. And array list. And then I'll just do a quick run of that just to make sure that the list view is displaying correctly. And there we go. Everything looks great there. Of course, tapping on an item in the list view at the moment doesn't do anything. We're going to want that to jump to a second activity where the user can edit their note. So let's create a new activity. And we want an empty activity as usual. And I'll call this the note editor activity. There we go. And here we're just going to have a single edit text, but it's an edit text that we haven't used before. I hope you spotted it. It's the multi-line text. So that's of course ideal for adding things like notes where we want the user to be able to add a large amount of multi-line text. All right, let's make this full screen as well. And I'm also going to take it a little bit further and take the relative layout and remove the padding. So you can see we've got some default padding there. I'm just going to set the padding for all top, bottom, left and right to be 0. And that will make it full screen and just look like we're editing the whole screen, which is a bit nicer. Okay. So now back to main activity. And we want to now add the feature when the user taps on an item in the list view, like that, it jumps to the note editor activity. And we should be fairly comfortable with this by now. So we're going to take our list view and set an on item click listener. And this is going to be a new adapter view dot on item click listener. And then when an item is clicked, that on item click method will be called. And we're going to want to jump to the note editor activity. So we'll create an intent called intent, which is going to be a new intent using the application context as the context, and then note editor activity dot class as the location of the intent. And of course, we also want to let the new activity know which item was tapped. So we're going to put an extra, I'll call it note ID, and it's going to be I, i.e. this variable here, which tells us the row number that was tapped. And then we're going to start activity, and the activity we're going to start is the intent. All right, so just before we run and check that, I'm going to jump over to our new activity, and we're going to display the text for the note that the user has selected. So we'll do that in the edit text. So let's just give it an ID. Oh, it's already got an ID of edit text. I think that will do fine, as there's only going to be one edit text in this app. So let's create an edit text called edit text, which is going to be an edit text, and we'll get it from find view by ID r.id.edit text. Then we need to get the note ID that was passed to this activity from main activity. So we'll do that by creating an intent, which will be this time the intent that was used to get to this activity. And then we'll create an integer note ID, which is going to be equal to the intent dot get int extra, and the name of the variable that we want to try and get the extra of is note ID. And we want to be pretty careful here just in case we get an invalid note ID somehow passed. So what I'm going to do is give that a default value of -1, which is impossible to get on the main activity because the list view IDs start at 0. So then we'll do a check to see if note ID is not -1. And if that's the case, then we'll set the text of the edit text to main activity dot notes, and we'll need to set that as a static variable type to allow that. And then we want to get the note ID. All right, so let's try that out. So we've now created an edit text and we're getting the note ID value from the intent. And if it's not -1, then we're getting the value of the notes text and displaying it in the edit text. So let's see this in action. Here we go. So here's our example note. Let's tap on that. And there we go. So it's worked almost exactly as intended. We've got the content and we're ready to go to edit it, but it is centered in the screen, which is not exactly what we want. So let's just go back and change that. If you remember, we changed that with the property gravity, which you can see is currently center vertical. So let's change it to top and left. Great. So now we've got our main screen up and running, and we've got our note editor displaying our note. The next step is to save the note as the user edits it. So as I mentioned, this isn't something we've done before. So let's see if we can figure out how to do it. So we're working with an edit text here. And we want to run some code when the text is changed, something like that. So let's see what we get here. So we've got 0.5 seconds after text change. That could be useful, but it's not quite what we want. Finish typing event, not exactly. How to apply the text change event on edit text, probably that would give us a result. But this one actually, Android on text change listener. That sounds like the sort of thing that we want. And here we go, look, add text changed listener. And then we've got some methods there after text change, before text change, and on text changed. I think that's ideal for us. So add text change listener, looks like what we want. Let's see if we can add that in here. So we'll take our edit text and add text changed listener. Let's just have a look. So it looks like we need a new text watcher. There we go. So let's use that. And it's given us the methods that we need. So before and after text change, we're not that interested in. All we need is on text changed. And I'd be willing to bet that this character sequence here is the content of the edit text, which is what we need. So let's give that a try. So we want to update the notes array list from the main activity. So we'll take main activity dot notes and we'll set, and the integer of the item in the array list that we want to change is going to be note ID. And the thing we want to change it to is this character sequence here. So that should do the trick, but notice that character sequence is of a type character sequence. So we're going to need to convert that to a string. So we'll use string dot value of to convert that character sequence to a string. And then we just want to update the list view itself via the array adapter. So we'll take main activity dot and then we want to access the array adapter. To do that, I'll need to redefine it up here. There we go. And then we can get the array adapter and notify dataset changed. So now, when we run the app, we should be able to edit the note and the changes will be automatically saved in the initial notes field and then of course displayed on the list view. And here we go. So we'll tap example note. So it's displayed nicely now. So I'll change that to a hello world. And then let's close the keyboard and go back. And we should indeed see hello world at the top of our list view. Great. So other than permanent storage, we've got almost all the features that we need, except for the adding and deleting of notes. So let's do that, and then we'll add the permanent storage aspect at the very end. So adding a note, we're going to do as a menu item at the top right there. So let's make that happen. We're going to need to add a new directory inside the resources folder. I'll call it menu. And then within that, we're going to add a new menu resource file. I'll call it add note menu. It's going to be a very simple menu. With just a single item in there. With an ID of add note. And a title of add note. And then we'll add it to our main activity. By adding our two methods, first on create options menu. And then we use our menu inflator to link our menu with the menu that we've just created. So we'll call it menu inflator. We'll use the get menu inflator method to create it. And then we'll inflate our menu. And we want to use r.menu.addNote menu, i.e. this one that I just created. And we want to assign that to the menu that's just been created. Okay. And then we want to add our on options item selected. And we want to do any default code that's required. And there's only one case that we're really interested in. So we're going to look for item.getItemID, and we're going to test to see if that's equal to r.id.addNote. So that was the ID of the menu item I just created there. And if that's the case, then we want to jump to the new activity. So intent, and this is going to be a new intent using the application context and note. We're going to jump to note editor activity.class. And this time I'm not going to provide a note ID. So instead we're just going to start the activity via the intent. All right, so now we need to prepare our note editor activity to add a new note. So we'll do this here. So So essentially here checks for a valid note ID, and if there isn't one, then we're going to add a new one. So I'm going to start by adding it to the notes array list. And initially it's just going to be empty. So I'm just creating an empty note here. Now it's going to be updated here, so we're going to need a note ID to be able to access it. It's actually quite easy to set. We just get note ID is equal to main activity.notes .size minus 1. So if, for example, the note that we've just added was the third item, then it would have an ID of 2, and the size of the notes array list would be 3, so minus 1 gives us the 2. Now we do have an issue here because we cannot edit final variables. They're fixed in value. So what we'll do is I'll define my note ID up here as a global variable, and then down here we'll just update it, and then we can access it from anywhere. And I'll also update the array adapter to display it in the list view. Okay, so we will give that a quick try. I do seem to have an error over in main activity though. Let's have a look and see what's gone wrong. Ah yes, we've got a missing return statement here in the on options item selected menu. So I'll just return true if the appropriate item is selected and return false if it's not. Easily forgotten. Let's give that a try. So we should now be able to use a menu item to add a new note, and that will be correctly saved within our app. Let's give it a go. Here we are. So click in the menu and add note. That then jumps to our new note. I'll just give myself a reminder to get milk and then go back, and there it is. Wonderful. So we're looking good. Just two things left now. One is to allow users to delete notes with a long press, and the other is, of course, permanent storage. So let's do the delete process first. We're going to be running this in main activity, and we're going to need an on-item long press listener. So let's add that in. So list view, set on item long click listener. And again, we're going to need an adaptive view dot on item long click listener. And here, this is where we're going to use our alert dialog builder to give the user just an option to confirm that they want to delete that note. So we'll need a new alert dialog builder. Using the application context. And then we'll do the usual process. So we'll set the icon to android.r.drawable, and I'll use the alert dialog icon. We'll set the title to "Are you sure?" And we'll set the message to "Do you want to delete this note?" And then we'll set the positive button to "Yes." And we'll add a new dialog interface on click listener. There we go. So if that one is pressed, then we want to remove it from notes. So we'll use notes dot remove, and the one that we want to remove is the one that was pressed, so that's I. And then we'll update the array adapter. Okay, that's what we need to do there. Then we'll set the negative button to just no, and we don't need anything to happen if they click no. So we'll leave the method as no, and then finally show. So show the alert dialog. And just before we run that, a couple of quick changes that we need to make. We need to change return false here to return true. Otherwise, when we do the long click, it will assume that we want to do a short click as well. So the return true overcomes that and only does the long click. And also, in my testing, we're going to get issues here with this application context being the context for our alert builder. So we actually want the activity to be the context, not the application. And we would normally do this to make that happen, but we can't do that here because we're within an onItem long click method, so that this would refer to that. So to force the main activity to be the context, we use main activity dot this. All right, so let's give that a try. We should now get our alert popping up, and then if we choose yes, it will remove our example note. So I've already got 2 example notes here. So I'm going to long press on the first one. We get the message coming up. Click yes. And we get a crash, which is curious, but again, worth leaving in, I think. And this is because we've got 2 I's here. So when we're talking about I in this context, we actually want this one, the one that was long clicked on, not the button that was clicked on to say yes. So to get around that, we'll create an integer called item to delete, and we'll set that equal to I, and then here we'll use item to delete instead of I. So again, easy mistake to make. I thought I'd leave that in because I wondered if some of you might have done that too. So let's try it again. So now, finally, with any luck, we'll do our long press on our example note, tap yes, and it's gone. Wonderful. Of course, I can still add a new note. Here we go. I'll put learn Java as my instruction, and there it is. And of course, a long press will get rid of that as well. Great. So now our Notes app works exactly as we'd like, but of course, we don't have the permanent storage yet. So let's set that up. Now there's a few places we're going to need to update the permanent storage. So one is right here when we delete an item. One is here when we save the content of an item. And possibly we could save permanent storage here when a new item is added. Although if they don't actually edit the note, whether or not we want to save a blank note for them permanently is debatable. In fact, I'm going to not do it there, so I'm just going to do it there and over in the main activity when the item is deleted. But the code is going to be very similar for both. And I'm going to use the string set this time. You're very welcome to use the same method that we used in the Memorable Places app, but just for a bit of variety, I'll show you how to do it with a string set. So let's set up our shared preferences. Call it shared preferences. And this time we are going to use the application context. And we're going to get the shared preferences using the package ID. So com.robpercival.notes. And as before, we'll use context.mode private so that only our app can access the data. And you'll remember, hopefully, that shared preferences allows us to get a number of different variable types, and the one we're going to be working with here is the string set. So we need a set to be working with. So I'm just going to create a set, which is known as a hash set. So it's a hash set of strings, which I'll just call set. And this is going to be a new hash set, but we're going to create it from our array list, i.e. main activity dot notes. Simple as that. So we create our string from our array list, and then we save it in shared preferences. So shared preferences dot edit dot put string set, and the string set that we want to put is set, and I'm going to call it notes. And then don't forget the apply at the end. And that's it. And then we'll just copy and paste that code over to main activity and pop it in there with the necessary classes so that the set is updated when a note is deleted. All right, so we're nearly there. The final thing we need to do is when we display the content of the list view, we need to check shared preferences and see if there's a set there, and if there is, then display the content from it. So let's get our shared preferences variable again here. And then let's get our set. So our hash set of, whoops, not string tokenizers, just strings will do. And this is going to be shared preferences dot get string set. And the string set that we're after is notes. And if that fails, I'm just going to bring out a null string set. And I think we actually need to cast this to a hash set of strings to make that work. There we go. So then we'll check to see if the set is null. Then we'll do our default setup and just add the example note. And if it's not, we want to take our notes array list and recreate it as a new array list, but this time based on the set. And that will then bring back all of the data from the set that's been saved and display it to the user. So let's find the moment of truth and check to see that this works as intended with the permanent storage now included. Okay, so let's go through the whole process. We'll add a note. I hope this works. Go back, and there it is. And we'll even delete an item as well. And then tap on the square button to bring up multitasking, and then tap the X to close the Notes app down. Then the circle button to go back to the home page. Click the All Apps button and then reopen Notes. Keep your fingers crossed and then rejoice because our saved note is right there. Wonderful. So I hope you managed to make most of that one yourself, and more importantly that you enjoyed the process. In the second half of this section, we're now going to go on and see a more complex but far more powerful way of storing data that avoids a lot of the complications that we've had to go to with sets, shared preferences. And that is using databases, and that we'll see how to do in the next video.